This is the BWR that you're all curious about, Mexico. We're in Querétaro, and I am back for round 2. This is my second time down south of the border for BWR Mexico. Last year having finished 3rd place behind Admiral Burge and Pete Stetina. Neither of them on the start list for today's race, so I am going for the W. I figured because the start list isn't super deep that I might have a good chance of landing on the podium at this event, especially since I did that last year and had decent success, and the prize purse is pretty good, so it's worth coming down here. And unlike my friend Dylan, who doesn't know anything about life experience and having fun, I like to do things like this. It's like you could go to Australia and see some kangaroos and Lachlan Morton, and
see Lachlan Morton all the time, dude.
Massive life experience things that other people would die for, and you're like, you know what? No, that would set my whole season up, because I got to hit the Mid-South, and it's just too. If it doesn't align with your racing priorities, the life experience part of it is just like you don't care. I wasn't exactly in race shape. My fitness was quite low for this time of the year. This race happens in the middle of November. This was the week before Thanksgiving, and this is not when a lot of pros are racing gravel. They usually hung up the bike at this point, and I had hung up the bike. I took 2 weeks off the bike completely after Big Sugar, and I've only been riding for 3 weeks before showing up to BWR Mexico, and I hadn't done a single workout. The race is 103 miles, 5,200 feet of climbing, broken up between 46 miles of gravel, 39 miles of pavement, and 18 miles of cobbles, roughly. And the one thing that you need to know about this race is that it is darn bumpy. I mean, my hands were killing me by the end of this race. Alright, as the race starts, you'll notice that this rider right here, Ulysses Castillo, flies up on my right hand side to the front of the neutral rollout because he doesn't want to miss out on the action. Now, this is a rider that I had marked because the locals had told me to watch out for him, so I knew his name from racing crits and had my eye on him, but wasn't super worried about him because the year prior he had finished over an hour behind me, suffering from multiple flats and mechanicals. Another guy I had my eye on was this guy with the blue bibs, white jersey to the far left of the screen. Now, I don't know who this guy is, don't know his name. I think the team he's on is a pretty big road team here in Mexico. He had a pretty big fan club there at the start line. I don't know, but this could be like the Lance Armstrong or Matthew Vanderpool of Mexico for all I know. So just the amount of people that were cheering him on at the start line kind of had me scared of like, who is this guy? But I never did see him again after the neutral rollout. Now we make it out to the main road after 2 or 3 miles of this neutral rollout, and I assumed that once we got to this paved section, which we only had about a mile of pavement before we jumped back onto some dirt roads, I assumed that on this pavement was when the race was going to go from neutral to race on. But I was wrong. I had my whole shot ignition ready to go and couldn't use it because we stayed neutral all the way into the dirt, and it didn't even start. The race didn't start until we hit the base of the first climb. And it's quite evident when the race goes from neutral to not neutral, right here. I opted not to do a warm-up because it was really cold that morning, so I stayed in the car for as long as possible, which in hindsight was kind of a bad call because I felt pretty bad on this first climb. The race started at the base of like a 7-minute climb, And by the top of that climb, I had already had to fight through some groups and was still gapped off the leaders. And little did I know that this first climb, the first 5 minutes of the race, was gonna be the race deciding moment, like the end. The first climb was about a 7-minute effort at 342 watts, which is a 0.98 intensity factor for my FTP. Now, these aren't world tour numbers by any means, but still higher than I'd like to go for the first few minutes of a 100-mile gravel race. As we crest over the top of the first climb, I'm in about 8th place, chasing with a few other guys. Ulysses and a teammate are up the road by a little bit, but we can see them only 10 or 15 seconds up the road, and we keep them within sight all throughout this first dirt sector. And I assume that once we get onto the pavement section, we'll just put in an effort and catch those 2 riders ahead of us. So when we hit the pavement, I actually have a gap and I'm in 3rd place, and I could have put in a big effort to catch up to those 2, or I could sit back and go back with the group behind me. And I decided for the latter, to go back to the group behind me, assuming we'd work together and catch those 2. Those 2 were pretty dedicated to the break, more dedicated than we were to the chase. Dizzle Kibitz number 12, don't give the enemy too much. Another big thing that I noticed early on in the race on the descents was just how much of an advantage the mountain bike tires already were. As you can see, I'm blowing past these guys on their skinny little gravel tires. The first off-road sector is about 8 miles. It takes us about 28 minutes. My power is 291 with an average heart rate of 175. I really should have put in a harder effort here to stay with Uli, knowing that he was my biggest competition in this event. Had I done that, I think the entire dynamic of the race would have changed in my favor. Watch this. I'm about to take the pro line on the sharp inside to avoid this entire cobbled road. Dizzle Kibitz number 13, course recon can be your secret weapon. I'm in a chase group of 5 to 7 riders, and there's still not a huge urgency to chase down those 2 riders ahead of us, knowing that we still have a lot of racing ahead of us. This was one of the funnest sectors on the course because it rode a lot like a mountain bike trail. And knowing that I have an advantage with my mountain bike tires, my goal going into the race was to push all the bumpy, rough, technical off-road sections so that I can create a gap or force some separation or make my competitors work a little bit harder through those sections because of the advantage of the tires. Sid tells us that Uli and his teammate have about 30 seconds. This cobbled road is an out and back, and it takes us out for a lollipop loop early in the race. Another strategy I had going into this race was to conserve some energy, because I knew that the last 20-ish miles of the race were the hardest by far of the entire race, because that's when you hit some of the biggest climbs, and there's back-to-back climbs all within the last 15-20 miles of the race. So knowing that my fitness is lower than normal, I'm hesitant to burn too many matches before I make it to the 80-mile mark. You know, just some normal shoot the gap between some moving vehicles maneuvers. No big deal. This is Mexico, dude. They probably do this stuff all the time. Alright, we're at about the midway point of the race. Uli is solo off the front. He's dropped his teammate, and we catch him. I'm starting to get a little more nervous about the 3-minute gap that we now have allowed this guy to have. I'm still optimistic that we'll chase and bring it back, but I'm starting to get a little bit more urgent, and I even get a little frustrated at one point and yell at the guys in the group that we need to pick up the pace, because there were a few people, 2 teammates, don't know what their strategy was, that would slow the pace down every time they got to the front of the group. They weren't on Uli's team, so I was kind of confused as to their strategy, and that's where my frustrated stemmed from, and that's why I yelled. And one of the guys, not one of those, a different guy, came up to me afterwards and said, "Hey man, we're not pros like you." I was like, "What do you mean you're not pros like me? We're in this thing together. There's a guy up the road. We gotta chase him down. What are you saying?" And that was when I realized how bad I had screwed up, because all these other guys had given up on even catching the guy up the road, and it seemed like I was the only one thinking he is still catchable. And that was when I realized I was gonna have to do the lion's share of the chase, and that was when I started to turn the switch up a little bit more to really start to chase him down, because I was starting to get nervous about that gap. Alright, to give you an idea on heart rate and power, for miles 11 to 63, which was about a 2-hour and 20-minute section of the race, my average power was 252 and my heart rate was 169. Now, around 63, mile 63 was when I really started to turn the intensity up, and from then to the end of the race, which was about a 2-hour effort, my normalized only went up by 3 watts, but my average heart rate went up by 8 beats per minute, averaging 177. This gives you an insight to the effort that I had to put in, but also the amount of cardiac drift that I was suffering from not having a ton of fitness. Alright, I pin it pretty hard through some technical sections and end up dropping everybody in the group except for one amigo. Flavia. I had respect for this guy, because he's the only other guy that was on mountain bike tires, and it's a brotherhood, so we're both in it. But he wasn't doing a lot of pulling. I was doing most of the pulling, and I was okay with that. But there was a little part of me that maybe this dude's gonna Admiral Burge me. And when we get to the last climb, because he was a pretty small dude, he would just light me up on the climb and drop me. But he got a flat right at the base of the climb, so that took care of that. And then right here, I can see the crest of the climb with this little city that you ride through to the top. And right there is one of the BWR cars. And I'm thinking, that's gotta be Uli. He's finally cracked or got a flat tire or blown up, and I am finally catching this guy. I've been full on chasing for 20, 30 miles now by myself practically. And I'm gonna catch this guy. So I get this massive burst of energy. I'm out of the saddle. I'm smashing the last part of this climb, and I come up on the car. It's definitely not Uli, and they tell me that he still has 3 minutes. So again, kind of a bummer, but I'm still optimistic because this guy flatted a bunch last year, and I'm hoping he hasn't learned his lesson and he's gotten really lucky up to this point, and he'll still flat before the finish. Because I was very confident in my tire selection, so I was hoping that he would flat because I kind of figured I wasn't going to catch him based on fitness. If going up a cobbled road sucks, going down sucks too. There is another advantage to running mountain bike tires because you can run a lower tire pressure, which absorbs a lot of the bumps, which means that you can bomb these descents. Hot dog, that was close. I almost died right there. Whoops, missed that turn. Let's make a quick U-turn, get back on course. Alright, pretty cool because the guy who's been taking care of me all week, Ampa, the owner of Breakaway Cycles, he's literally the guy that I'm staying with all week. He's the guy on the moto that's been following me throughout the whole race. Not just me, but the entirety of the leaders. He's giving us bottles, he's taking stuff. That's one of the cool things about these BWR events is that they really do treat you like you're in a pro race, and they give you bottle feeds and they take stuff from you. And that really makes it a lot better for the pros to race. And I gotta give a massive thanks to him and his Breakaway Cycles crew. They took super good care of me all week, very hospitable. I would go back in a heartbeat just to hang out with all those guys. And I roll in for a second place finish, several minutes behind Uli, but still happy to be on the podium with my best ever BWR finish. And here are the race stats. You've got a 5:06 finish time. I did a 256 normalized power, which is 0.73 intensity factor, 171 average heart rate, 272 TSS, second place. Dizzle Kibitz, number 14. Always fist bump the guys ahead of you and behind you. That's all I got for this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and if you're looking for a coach, head over to ignitioncoachco.com. Get $100 off your first month of coaching if you mention this channel. See you guys in the next one.